Hi, Lou here, and today I'm going to talk about 13 laws of game design. And I say laws with quotes around it because many are more like extreme likelihoods and some are rules of thumb. Here's a list, and I'll talk about each one individually. Of course, I can't really leave out Murphy's Law, which is whatever can go wrong will go wrong. But it is pretty extreme. The point for game developers is don't assume that things are going well. Rather, monitor what's happening to be sure it's going well, or if it isn't, then you can do something about it. The law of realism, which is you're most unlikely to get rich designing games. In fact, if you want to get filthy rich, you're better off playing the lotteries. Phenomena like Minecraft and Clash of Clans are much less common than ginormous lottery wins. The law of constraints. Contemporaries have been taught to dislike constraints, but games are inherently an artificial set of constraints intended to result in interesting play. Constraints encourage creativity. Complete freedom discourages creativity. This has been shown by the history of many arts, such as music and painting. When you design a game, set limits for yourself to work within, and you'll be a lot better off. The law of game creativity. Games are 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, because most of game design is a form of engineering. Furthermore, you can't wait for creativity to come by and sort of knock you on the head. It's often an active, not a passive endeavor. And where you don't want to discount creativity is in problem solving, the engineering part of game design, because sometimes creativity will help you solve a difficult problem. Nielsen's first law of usability. Quote, your design will be tested by users. Your only choice is whether to run the test yourself before launch so that you can fix the inevitable problems while it's cheap instead of playing expensive catch-up later. Well, this is Jacob Nielsen, who is a guru of web page design, and it's actually a law for website development, but applies equally to game design. The law of inevitability. If there's a way to play the game that's within the rules or allowed by the programming, somebody will play it that way. In other words, don't rely on sportsmanship or on players being gentlemanly or any other vague notion to prevent someone from playing within the rules of the programming in a way you don't like. Instead, you have to design the game so that that way that you don't like is either impossible or impractical because it doesn't lead to success. Often the reason people play in what you might think are odd ways is because they've found a strategy that works. Camping is the obvious example. If the game rules make camping a successful strategy, some people are going to do it. But you can design a game so that camping is not going to be successful. And then there will still be some people who camp, but one, it won't bother the other players because they know it won't be successful, and two, people won't do it very often. Sturgeon's law, which derives from a statement made by a science fiction author long ago, and variously it is either 90% or 99% of everything is shit. Now this applies more to academic debate and research than to most of life, but in the era of fake news and internet experts who aren't, perhaps it's becoming more and more apparent how much of life is just stuff you should ignore, or stuff that's not worth bothering with, is shit. The law of varied preferences. Beyond debunking myths, the most important thing to learn in game design is what you think makes a game good makes a game bad for many others. The corollary is you are not your target audience. And another corollary is design games for your target audience, not for you. Now, this doesn't mean it never happens that people design games for themselves and they become very popular. Doom is an example, the video game. It happened that there were an awful lot of people who wanted a game like the guys who designed Doom wanted a game, and it worked for them very well, but you can't rely on that. Now, Lew's laws of management. And in these two statements, chaos is by definition undesirable. The first one, the increase in chaos is proportional to the square of the number of people involved. In other words, the bigger the group, the more complex things are going to be, the more chaotic things are going to be. The second one is something you can do more about. Sometimes you have to have a group of a reasonable size to get the game done. But the second one is the increase in chaos is proportional to the cube of the number of people in charge. So you don't have to have very many people in charge before you've really increased the chaos a great deal. And the lesson there is have one person who's in charge. The law of problem solving, and I put quotation marks around law here because it's actually a scientific observation. It's not a law in any way. And that is this: well understood problems are best solved by one person. Poorly understood problems are best solved by groups of people. Think of adding a column of numbers manually. Would you rather have a group do this or one person, keeping in mind the group costs a lot more money? If you have one person who's good at adding columns of numbers, that's usually all you need. The law of productivity. If you don't make the prototype, you're not going to get anywhere. I hope this is obvious. You have to make a prototype so you can actually play it. The second, playing games rarely helps you design games. I know a designer who would design more games if he didn't like playing games so much. Yes, you need to have played enough games to know them, but game design is not about you playing games. The law of ideas, and there's a lot to this. Great ideas are a dime a dozen because most of the ideas people think are great are not. Ideas are worthless in some sense because everyone has game ideas just like everyone has fingers. And yes, there are exceptions, but most people. Even the best idea can be poorly executed and often is. So many would say there are no great ideas, only great games. And I say we usually don't know they're great until years after publication. Further, you have to work at getting ideas. You can't just wait for them to float by. The 110-100 rule, which comes from W. Edwards Deming and is part of what's now known as total quality management. It's a rule of thumb. Find a problem, something that needs fixing, early in the production process, and it costs 1 unit of effort, money, whatever, to fix. Find it after production, before it's released, and it costs 10 to fix. 10 units of whatever it is. Find it when the product is out in the public's hands, and it costs 100 units to fix. Now, he was interested in assembly line kinds of manufacturing, but it applies to game design as well, and that's of course why we playtest games, and we try to playtest them a lot. So whether you call these laws or hypotheses or principles or theories or rules, whatever term you want to use, they're important to take into account when you design games. Thanks for listening.